Desertion on the battlefield is shameful, but what if 400,000 soldiers run away together? This mass escape of 400,000 men was an outright military disgrace. Yet why has it been remembered in history as a miracle, and even elevated into a spiritual totem by an entire nation? In May 1940, Nazi Germany launched a ferocious lightning war against France. Elite armored divisions did not smash head-on into the Maginot Line that France had spent enormous sums building, but instead, to the shock of every Allied commander, moved like ghosts through the Ardennes, a region believed to be impassable for tanks. This deadly left hook struck straight through the middle of the Allied forces, cutting their main strength in half. Hundreds of thousands of British expeditionary troops and elite French units were driven northward by the German armored scythe, until they were finally crushed into a small port in northern France, Dunkirk. In front of them lay the raging English Channel, and behind and beside them came the relentlessly advancing German army. 400,000 soldiers became trapped prey in a sealed jar, and what awaited them seemed to be only surrender or destruction. A young British soldier named Tommy is searching empty streets for water and food with several comrades. What drifts down from the sky are not leaflets of victory, but German surrender notices. The map printed on them clearly announces their hopeless situation. The British and French forces have been surrounded on three sides by the German armored tide, with only the cold English Channel left behind them, coldly declaring their fate. In the next second, scattered German gunfire erupts without warning, the shots tearing apart the silence as comrades around him fall one by one. Driven by pure survival instinct, Tommy runs wildly, bullets screaming past his ears. Relying on a final shred of luck, Tommy crosses the French defensive line and reaches the beach that will haunt him for the rest of his life. Across the vast shoreline, rows of tightly packed soldiers stand in formation like prisoners awaiting judgment, stretching endlessly to the edge of vision. 400,000 young lives converge in this moment into one massive, silent collective. Their fate hangs by a thread, and their only hope is the possibility of rescue ships appearing beyond the horizon. On the beach, Tommy meets a soldier who is burying the body of a fallen comrade. This quiet young man is someone we later learn is named Gibson. He removes the dead man's boots and puts them on his own feet, not out of cruelty, but because in this hellscape it is the most realistic rule of survival. They soon discover that large destroyers, with their deep draft, cannot approach the beach at all. The soldiers can only board by using a long breakwater stretching into the sea, or wait for small boats to ferry them out. Tommy and Gibson try to join a line, only to be told that it is reserved for grenadiers. At that moment, a piercing shriek rips through the sky, the unmistakable Jericho trumpet of German Stuka dive bombers. It is the overture of death circling above Dunkirk. There is no cover anywhere on the beach, and the soldiers become the most ideal targets in the eyes of German pilots. The crowd collapses in an instant, and everyone can only press themselves into the sand, leaving their fate to chance and luck. Tommy clutches his head tightly as bombs tear up waves of sand around him, the cries of wounded comrades mixing with the thunder of aircraft engines. When the air raid ends, he rises on shaking legs, and around him lie bodies that will never stand again. Those who survived silently return to their positions, as if everything that just happened was only an interlude in a nightmare. Amid the chaos, they keenly notice that a wounded man on a stretcher is still breathing. He exchanges a knowing glance with Gibson, and without a single word, the two lift the stretcher together and sprint toward the breakwater that leads to life. Under the pretense of escorting a wounded soldier, they squeeze through the packed crowd, and at the very last moment before the medical ship casts off, they manage to get aboard. But hope is painfully short-lived. Because they are neither wounded nor medics, the officer on board mercilessly orders them off the ship, as space must be reserved for those who need it most. Unwilling to return to the beach that feels like hell itself, the two quickly hide within the structure beneath the breakwater. It is relatively safe there, and also offers a clear view to observe the right moment. It is there that they accidentally overhear a conversation between Naval Commander Bolton and an Army Colonel.
Di quanti uomini parlano, signore?
Churchill ne vuole 30.000, Ramsey spera di dargliene 45.000.
Ce ne sono 400.000 su questa spiaggia, signore.
What they hear reveals an even more desperate reality. The German armored forces have halted their advance, and Hitler appears to be deliberately letting the Air Force finish the encirclement, turning this beach into a massive killing ground. Far away in London, Churchill, facing the trapped force of 400,000 men, dares only hope to evacuate 30 to 40,000. That number means that out of every 10 men, perhaps only one will make it home. Before the words even fade, a new wave of air attacks arrives, and this time the target is the breakwater beneath their feet and the docked medical ship. In the eyes of elite German pilots, the slowly moving medical ship is nothing more than a gigantic live target. The bomb hits with precision, the ship bursts into flames and tilts violently, and crew members leap into the sea to survive. Driven by the immense impact, the ship slams into the breakwater, crushing countless people between them as horrifying screams fill the air. Amid the chaos, Tommy desperately saves an artilleryman named Alex who is nearly crushed to death. Tommy and Gibson then leap into the freezing water, posing as survivors who have fallen overboard, and together with Alex they finally climb onto a small rescue boat and are taken aboard a destroyer. Inside the destroyer's cabin, warm tea and bread spread with jam feel like comforts from another world. The soldiers lower their guard for a moment and savor a brief sense of peace, yet the scent of war never truly fades. Gibson remains silently on deck, watching the Dunkirk coastline where flames roar into the night sky. Inside the cabin, Alex and Tommy also sense something is wrong. They put on life jackets and quietly squeeze closer to the cabin door, preparing for whatever may come. Sure enough, the calm does not last. As a torpedo fired by a German submarine strikes the destroyer hard in the darkness, the cabin is instantly flooded. The lights go out, and soldiers struggle amid darkness and chaos. Tommy sinks into the water, suffocation and despair closing in around him. At the critical moment, it is Gibson on the deck who, despite the tilting ship and the danger of being thrown into the sea at any second, forces open the cabin door sealed shut by water pressure. A surge of seawater bursts in, blasting Tommy, Alex, and the others out of their deadly trap. Once again they are thrown into the icy sea, and after finally grabbing a rope dropped from a life raft, they are dragged back toward the Dunkirk beach. After so many twists and brushes with death, Tommy, Alex, and Gibson find themselves once again back where they started, on the beach of Dunkirk. It feels as if fate itself is playing a cruel joke. Over the course of a single night, they move from hope to despair and back to hope again, only to return to where they started. Crossing the English Channel to go home, a route that seems so close, turns out to be unbearably distant. On the beach at this moment, despair is spreading. Some soldiers throw away their equipment and walk alone into the sea, trying to swim across the channel. Others attempt to challenge the raging waves with crude wooden rafts, only to be mercilessly slammed back onto the shore. Alex, Tommy, and Gibson, three comrades who have survived side by side, decide to search for another way out. Following a unit of Highland soldiers, they discover a grounded civilian trawler on the distant tidal flats. They hide inside the cabin, their only hope being to wait for the tide to rise in a few hours so the ship can float again and take them home. However, this area has already fallen beyond the effective defensive range of the Allied forces. Soon, gunfire is heard outside the hull, at first just a few scattered shots, then growing more frequent. By calmly observing the pattern of bullet holes, Tommy determines that this is not the Germans discovering them, but rather bored German soldiers using the stranded ship as target practice. He reassures the others, telling them to stay quiet and wait for the right moment. But as time passes, the growing number of bullet holes becomes a deadly threat. Rising seawater begins to pour relentlessly into the cabin through the holes. The ship grows heavier and heavier, and the hope of floating again becomes slimmer by the minute. To survive, the only option is to reduce weight. In the claustrophobic environment, the darkest side of human nature begins to surface.
Qualcuno deve scendere adesso. Sei il primo volontario. Non ci serve un volontario. Ne conosco uno che deve scendere.
Alex turns his accusations toward Gibson, who has remained silent from the beginning. He incites the others, claiming Gibson is a German spy who cannot speak English, and demands that he be thrown overboard to lighten the ship. Under mounting pressure, the long silent Gibson finally reveals the truth. He is not German. He is a French soldier who simply put on a British uniform in order to evacuate with them. This truth brings no sympathy, but instead intensifies the conflict. For these British soldiers who only want to go home, the presence of an outsider becomes the perfect outlet for their fear and frustration. Only Tommy remembers how Gibson opened the door on the destroyer and saved lives, and steps forward to defend him. Just as the internal conflict is about to explode, the trawler finally begins to sway as the rising tide lifts it. The argument stops, and everyone frantically plugs the bullet holes, trying to get the ship moving, but the hull is riddled with damage and soon sinks not far from shore. During the frantic escape, the French soldier Gibson, who quietly helped others yet was ultimately suspected and excluded, becomes entangled in a fishing net and drowns silently in the icy water. His death does not even stir a ripple, becoming yet another forgotten casualty in the chaos of the evacuation. In my view, This moment on the trawler is the film's most profound interrogation of human nature. In extreme conditions, a group will easily sacrifice an individual for its own survival, especially an individual who is seen as an outsider. Gibson's tragedy is not only the cruelty of war, but also the lower boundary of humanity's darkness. The instinct to survive overwhelms reason and morality, and this is even more chilling than direct killing on the battlefield. On the other side of the channel, an unprecedented civilian rescue operation is quietly unfolding, with large warships suffering heavy losses and easily becoming targets. The British government urgently requisitions a large number of civilian vessels, calling on private boat owners to sail to Dunkirk and bring their soldiers home. Our second perspective follows a boat owner named Mr. Dawson. He is an experienced old sailor who pilots his private yacht, the Moonstone, and answers the call without hesitation. Traveling with him are his son Peter, and Peter's schoolmate, a young boy named George who is eager to prove himself. As the Moonstone crosses the open sea, they encounter the wreckage of a sunken destroyer, with a soldier sitting atop it, his eyes hollow and his body trembling from extreme shock. Dawson and his son rescue him aboard. After enduring the hell of explosions and a sinking ship, this soldier is suffering from severe psychological trauma. When he learns that the Moonstone's destination is Dunkirk, he completely breaks down. That place is a nightmare he would give anything to escape. He screams in despair, demanding that Dawson turn back, because he never wants to return to that hell again. To calm him down, Peter brings him into the cabin to rest and quietly locks the door from the outside. This action completely enrages the soldier, who climbs out through the skylight and violently struggles with Dawson, trying to seize the wheel and force the boat to turn back. In the chaos, George tries to step in to stop him, but is violently shoved by the out-of-control soldier, his head slamming hard into a solid part of the cabin. When the soldier realizes what he has caused, he finally falls silent, his eyes filled with regret and fear. After checking him, Peter discovers that George's injury is extremely serious, and that he may even lose his sight. He begs his father to turn back and get George medical treatment, but Mr. Dawson simply bandages George quietly, then grips the wheel with resolve and continues toward Dunkirk. He knows that turning back might save George, but ahead of them are thousands of young men just like George, waiting to be rescued. The small Moonstone continues forward. Along the way, they witness a fierce aerial battle between British Spitfire fighters and German aircraft. They see Collins's plane damaged, forcing him to make an emergency landing on the sea. Mr. Dawson immediately changes course and speeds toward the landing point. Collins is trapped inside the cockpit that will not open, as seawater rapidly floods in. Just as he is about to suffocate, the Moonstone arrives. Peter smashes the cockpit glass with an oar and pulls the Royal Air Force pilot to safety. At this moment, aboard this small civilian boat are the father and son owners, an injured boy, a psychologically shattered soldier, and a rescued pilot. It is like a miniature wartime society, carrying different destinies and moving steadily toward a shared goal. When they finally reach Dunkirk, the scene on the sea is completely different. Hundreds upon hundreds of civilian vessels like theirs converge from all directions, forming a vast civilian fleet. Commander Bolton on the breakwater initially feels uncertain when he sees tiny black dots appearing on the horizon. When he looks through binoculars and realizes they are civilian boats, this naval officer who has held his post under immense pressure is overcome with tears. He turns to the colonel beside him and says a single word in a trembling voice: "Home." At this moment, that word carries immense weight, because it represents not only a physical return, but also the knowledge that the nation has not abandoned them. The soldiers on the beach, once drained of all spirit, erupt in thunderous cheers. The joy of survival sweeps away the heavy gloom that has hung over them for days. Dawson's Moonstone plays a crucial role in the rescue. When a minesweeper packed with soldiers is struck by German bombers, leaking fuel that blackens the surrounding sea, Tommy, Alex, and others who escaped the sinking trawler are struggling in the oil slick. Moments later, bombs dropped by German aircraft ignite the fuel on the water, instantly turning it into a sea of fire. Relying on his extensive sailing experience, Mr. Dawson steers into the danger at a critical moment, pulling Tommy, Alex, and the others aboard before the flames consume everything, once again snatching them from the edge of death. Our third storyline follows Royal Air Force pilot Farrell, together with two other pilots, Collins and their squad leader. He flies the most advanced Spitfire fighters of the time toward Dunkirk to provide air cover for the evacuation fleet. They have only one mission: to hunt down German aircraft attempting to attack. In the vast sky, they are the only shield protecting hundreds of thousands of soldiers on the beach. The battle erupts quickly, and during a dogfight with German fighters, their squad leader is shot down, leaving Farrell and Collins to continue the mission. Soon after, Collins's aircraft is also hit, forcing him to make an emergency landing at sea, where he is fortunately rescued by the Moonstone. Now, of the 3 Spitfires, only Farrell remains. Even worse, he discovers that his fuel gauge has been damaged, leaving him to estimate his remaining flight time based on experience and the fuel level he previously synchronized with Collins. According to regulations, he should immediately return to base to ensure his own safety and the safe return of this valuable aircraft. But when he looks down at the sea and sees the dense cluster of rescue ships and soldiers still under attack, he makes a decision that defies orders but follows his heart. To keep fighting, relying on superb piloting skills, Farrell defuses crisis after crisis. He shoots down the bomber threatening the minesweeper, protecting Dawson's Moonstone. As his battle reaches its climax, he pursues the final German bomber. At this moment, the main fuel tank is empty, and he switches to the reserve tank, which means there is no longer any chance of returning. He calmly shoots down the bomber, stopping it from slaughtering the soldiers struggling for survival at sea. After that, his engine completely cuts out, the propeller stops spinning, and the graceful Spitfire turns into a glider. Thunderous cheers erupt from the beach as the soldiers salute this nameless hero, thanking him for using his final moments of light to protect their lives. Farrell completes his final mission, gliding calmly over the coast of Dunkirk, over his compatriots' boarding ships below. He then lands the aircraft smoothly on a beach inside German-occupied territory. He steps out of the cockpit with composure and ignites his plane with a signal flare, ensuring this advanced fighter does not fall into enemy hands. In the glow of the setting sun, he removes his helmet and quietly watches the burning aircraft, waiting for the fate of capture. At this moment, his silhouette appears incomparably resolute. The Moonstone returns to Britain loaded with rescued soldiers, and on deck, Tommy and Alex sit exhausted. They believe that returning home as deserters will earn them contempt and scorn from the public. Yet when they step onto the dock, they are greeted instead by cheers and words of comfort. An elderly man hands them blankets and hot tea, speaking sincerely from a newspaper.
Bravi ragazzi, ben fatto. Bravi ragazzi, molto bene.
Siamo solo sopravvissuti.
E vi pare poco?
Tommy reads that famous speech by Churchill: "We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills, we shall never surrender. Wars are not won by evacuation, but in this evacuation, victory was born." This line gives an entirely new meaning to what appeared to be a humiliating retreat. The Dunkirk evacuation ultimately rescued more than 330,000 soldiers, nearly 10 times the original plan. These 330,000 surviving troops became the spark of hope for the future counteroffensive in Europe. So this was a victorious retreat. With this, the film comes to an end. Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk is not a traditional war film. Here, you see no master strategists, no direct clashes between opposing armies, and even the enemy remains vague and depersonalized, taking the form of aircraft screaming through the sky, bullets fired from afar, and torpedoes lurking beneath the sea. The first thing Nolan does is take away, stripping us as viewers of the familiar godlike perspective and sense of safety. Traditional war films always give us a strategic map, a command center, and a clearly defined enemy, and we are used to understanding battles from a macro perspective and judging gains and losses. But in Dunkirk, all of this is mercilessly removed. Like Tommy, we never know where the next bomb will fall. Like Captain Dawson, we do not know what kind of danger lurks in the vast sea. Like Pilot Farrell, we can only watch the fuel run out and face the judgment of fate alone. This extreme imbalance of information turns us from observers into participants, even into captives. We are tightly bound to the characters' destinies, sharing their pure fear of the unknown. It is precisely through this deprivation that Nolan transforms the war film into a survival horror film. This may be my most central insight into the movie. The enemy in the film is no longer a specific ideological German soldier, but an abstract, omnipresent, and unpredictable environmental threat. The screaming Stuka bombers resemble prehistoric pterosaurs. The U-boats lurking beneath the water feel like the unseen monster from Jaws. Even the scattered bullets fired from distant dunes at a stranded trawler feel more like an indifferent natural disaster than a human war. Once the enemy is dehumanized, the film's theme shifts from confrontation to survival. It no longer explores hatred, justice, or ideological conflict, but returns to a more primal question of life. In the face of overwhelming and unstoppable disaster, where should humanity go? This gives every action by the characters its most reasonable explanation, the small tricks soldiers use to get on ships, and the cruelty of excluding others to reduce weight when water floods the cabin, are not simple expressions of good or evil, but the most honest survival responses under immense pressure. Corresponding to this is Nolan's complete reshaping of heroism. In this film, no hero is defined by combat. For Tommy, our main land perspective, his heroism lies in surviving again and again, and his greatest achievement is simply staying alive. He embodies the humblest yet most resilient wish of 400,000 ordinary soldiers. As for Mr. Dawson, the civilian who sails his private yacht through gunfire, he represents the responsibility and resolve of the home front, and his boat becomes an ark of British national spirit. Even Farrell, the character closest to a traditional hero, shines not through battle. His defining moment, gliding his Spitfire after running out of fuel and shooting down the last enemy plane like a silent angel, is still ultimately about protection. His sacrifice is made so that his compatriots on the beach can return home safely. Through these three groups of characters, Nolan tells us that heroism does not have only one form: fulfilling one's duty in desperate circumstances, preserving human kindness, and creating chances for others to survive is the highest form of heroism. It is a more mature, restrained, and relatable vision of heroism. In the end, everything returns to the original question: why could the collapse of 400,000 men be called a miracle? After enduring nearly 2 hours of oppression and suffocation, I found my answer. This miracle lies not in military victory, but in victory of humanity. The miracle is that ordinary people like Mr. Dawson answered the call, piloting hundreds and thousands of civilian boats like sea taxis through gunfire to bring their compatriots home. A miracle of collective courage overcoming individual fear. The miracle is that soldiers like Tommy and Alex, after multiple shipwrecks and countless brushes with death, never abandoned their will to live and finally stepped onto their homeland. A miracle of resilience defeating despair. The miracle is that when these soldiers, who believed themselves to be deserters, returned to Britain expecting scorn, they were met with applause and comfort, and only then realized that surviving and bringing hope home was their greatest contribution to the nation. A miracle that redefined victory. Dunkirk ultimately tells us that the grand narrative of war is built from countless small stories of survival. It is not a song of triumph, but an epic about going home. It allows us to deeply understand that in any era, facing any hardship, unity, mutual support, and the belief that getting home equals victory may be the most fundamental force that carries a nation through history's storms toward the light. That is all for today. I am a film enthusiast, and I look forward to meeting you again next time.